Stewardship is a theological belief that humans are responsible for the world and should take care of it. Stewardship is believing in one God who created the universe and all that is within it, and that the people of the world must take care of creation and look after it. Creation includes animals and the environment. An example of stewardship is in Genesis 2, verse 15. And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. The drive to serve the garden in which we have been placed. Sees Christian influence. Stewardship in Christianity follows from the belief that human beings are created by the same God who created the entire universe and everything in it. To look after the earth and thus God's dominion is the responsibility of the Christian steward. Another part of the Bible where we can see stewardship is in the book of Leviticus. The book of Leviticus consists of God's speeches to Moses in which he is commanded to repeat to the Israelites. This takes place within the story of the Israelites' exodus after they escaped Egypt and reached Mount Sinai. In Leviticus chapter 25, verse 23, it states, "The land must not be sold permanently, because the land is mine, and you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers." God is stating that we can't take advantage of the earth because it is his, and we should not exploit its resources. In Isaiah chapter 24, verses 4 and 5, it states, "The earth mourns and fades. The world languishes and fades. Both heaven and earth languish. The earth is polluted because of its inhabitants, for they have transgressed laws, violated statutes, broken the ancient covenant." This is evident within multinational corporations. By buying water rights, the multinational corporations are taking advantage of the earth and using up its resources. In Pope Francis's homily at his inauguration, he states, "The vocation of being a protector, however, is not just something involving us Christians alone. It also has a prior dimension which is simply human, involving everyone. It means protecting all creation, the beauty of the created world, as the book of Genesis tells us and as St. Francis of Assisi showed us. It means respecting each of God's creatures and respecting the environment in which we live."
As Pope Francis mentions in Laudato Si, I don't believe humans are supposed to be have dominion over Earth. Instead, we're really supposed to be the caretakers of this planet. And everything that we do depends on the environment. We kind of pretend like we live in this bubble of economics and don't realize that all of the resources we need come from the earth. And so if we do not protect the earth, if we're not the caretakers, then this is going to obviously cause some very negative effects for us in the long run.
One way in which the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops defines Christian stewardship is, as Christian stewards, you receive God's gifts gratefully, cultivate them responsibly, share them lovingly in justice with others, and return them with increase to the Lord. We are called to develop a deep respect for creation and lead our lives in a way that contributes to the preservation of the masterpiece we have been given. The creation story in Genesis is the most prominent piece of evidence for this Catholic belief, and often the basis of the motivation for many organizations that work towards goals that help restore the respect for the planet. A more recent and also prominent document that supports the need for stewardship is from Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si', in which he discusses the issues in our world today that are relevant to this teaching and how the practices of many are contributing to the deterioration of our resources and parts of the planet. He proclaims, "We are not faced with two separate crises, one environmental and the other social, but rather one complex crisis which is both social and environmental. Strategies for a solution demand an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the underprivileged, and at the same time protecting nature. This points to the fact that as Christians, we should not compartmentalize, but rather hold values that are seamless and hold true for all of our attitudes toward the challenges we face when it comes to doing our part to protect the environment while also practicing other Catholic social teachings."
One such teaching is The Ecological Crisis, A Common Responsibility by Pope John Paul II in 1990. He discussed environmental racism, where one group creates the damage and another group has to deal with it. An example of this could be how us Floridians, South Floridians, we treat the environment, where other humans have to deal with the damage, such as the Native Americans, where we've drained their sea land and their Everglades, and now they have nowhere else to go.
Disposable plastics, I think, are one of our biggest issues in the marine environment, especially as plastic takes thousands of years to biodegrade. And just for an example, humans dispose of, or actually throw away, about 50 billion water bottles every year. So if you can imagine, just visualize how that can add up, and that's not biodegrading. So for Earth Week this year, we wanted to focus on preventing plastic pollution just by doing something as simple as not using disposable water bottles. So we are selling reusable water bottles, but even if you did not purchase one from us, please use a reusable water bottle, use reusable grocery bags, because that's something you don't think about, but is definitely going to be affecting us in the future.
Originally dubbed La Laguna del Espiritu by the Spaniards who colonized the area, the Everglades are home to some of the world's most unique species of plants and animals. Important to the Native American tribes that once lived here, the wetland ecosystem remains one of the few wetlands worldwide. However, as time has passed and humanity has expanded, much of the original wetland has been molded to suit other needs such as housing, agriculture, and transportation. From the beginning of its inception as a national park, the Everglades has been under constant threat to drainage, invasive species, and destructive land development. When the park was given by the federal government to the state of Florida as a national park, a provision to drain much of the land for agricultural development was included. Sugarcane and rice plantations quickly entered the area and grew, destroying much of the original wetlands. This area today is called the Everglades Agricultural Area under a 1948 program title, and consists of over 700,000 acres of farmland just south of Lake Okeechobee, where wetland used to be. The main crop to this day remains sugarcane. However, rerouting of the water supply has led to as much damage as the removal of water. In the early 1900s, a pair of major hurricanes struck Florida and killed thousands, spurring the government to install dikes, or walls along a river meant to stop flooding, around Lake Okeechobee in the agricultural area. While not directly modifying the Everglades, the resulting stoppage of flow from the lake caused the water to reroute and drain much of the eastern area we now know as Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Drainage and rerouting continued for many years, including the modification of the Kissimmee River into a canal system that destroyed thousands of acres of wetland. In total, there are over 1,400 miles of canals and levees within the Everglades. There are plans in place to restore some of the Kissimmee to its original course, which would restore about 26,000 acres of wetland, but this is still a far cry from full restoration.
The Everglades Environmental Restoration Plan is actually the largest restoration plan in the United States, actually internationally. It's expected to cost about $7.8 billion and take approximately 38 years to complete. It is good in that they are planning on restoring some of the historic water flow of the Everglades, but unfortunately the plan is designed more to bring back the water that we're kind of wasting by shuttling it into Florida Bay instead of letting it drain into the aquifer. So at the same time, it's more for humans in order to prevent, water loss. However, the restoration plan is not really to help with all the endangered species in the Everglades.
Even areas that have escaped water changes are at serious risk of destruction at the hands of invasive species. Estimates say that over 1 in 4 of all animals and plants in South Florida are classified as exotic or non-native species. These flora and fauna are not limited as they would be in their natural environments by weather conditions or predators, and instead flourish in the humid tropical climate with no natural threats. 1,301 species of native flora have been noted in Florida, whereas 1,392 and counting non-native flora have been identified. Some of these include the Melaleuca tree, whose seeds were dispersed by aircraft into the Everglades in order to drain flooded areas, but now block native plant life from growing, and water lettuce, a free-floating water plant brought over accidentally in the 1700s that blocks canals for boats and sunlight for underwater plants. As for animals, 192 exotic animals and over 1,000 exotic insects have found their way into South Florida and cost over $1 billion in structural and agricultural damage each year. Examples include the lobate lac-scale insects that latch onto many different species of native Florida trees and infest the outer surface, inhibiting sunlight from reaching the trees in severe cases. Also, the green iguana from Central America that eats native vegetation and digs burrows in urban communities, interrupting day-to-day life, and the Asiatic clam from China that displaces wildlife in Lake Okeechobee and beyond, whose shells can accumulate on the lakebed and shoreline as debris. However, the Asiatic clam are somewhat beneficial as ducks do feed on them, and they do clean the water supply in some areas.
Alligators are extremely important to the Everglades because they're one of the top predators. We actually call them keystone species. By feeding on some of the lower animals such as turtles and fish, they actually keep, of course, everything in balance. For example, turtles eat a lot of vegetation, and if it wasn't for the alligators feeding on the turtles, then there'd be less vegetation available, and then species that need vegetation as habitat or other food can collapse. Alligators are also what we call ecosystem engineers because they dig alligator holes, and this is extremely important for the aquatic life in the Everglades during the dry season. When the sawgrass prairie dries out, all of the fish and other aquatic animals have to basically congregate in either some of the sloughs or the alligator holes that the alligators built.
Can I get a Go Gators? Go Gators.
Kevin Clark wrote an article in the U.S. Catholic that identifies the wrongdoings of major corporations such as fracking or hydraulic fracturing and how they contribute to the negligence of the care for our planet and our society today. Fracking is a process to retrieve oil, and much of his research revealed how harmful the effect of the practices such as fracking can be. It pollutes the air because of large amounts of methane used in the process and can also deplete the clean water supply and affect the condition of the soil in the surrounding area, which destroys vegetation and takes away from the livelihood of some. This is an example of the way in which companies practice methods that promote economic efficiency at the cost of the health of the environment. In our local communities, we are faced with similar challenges that encourage the cooperation of the local population to change their routines in order to better conserve the aspects of creation that we take for granted every day.
My favorite part of the Everglades is Shark River Valley, which is actually one of the 2 largest sloughs in the Everglades. I like it because I like to go mountain biking through there. And also during the dry season, that's where all of the alligators kind of congregate. So in the dry season, you can see hundreds of alligators in one place.